In the treacherous waters off the coast of Maine, where jagged rocks rise from the Atlantic, like the teeth of some primordial beast waiting to devour unwary vessels, there stands a lighthouse whose beam has guided mariners to safety for more than a century. But the light that shines from Sorrow's End Light Station carries with it a darkness that few who see it can comprehend, a secret so macabre that it transforms what should be a symbol of hope and salvation into something far more sinister, a beacon that calls to forces that dwell beneath the waves and demands prices that no rational person should ever be willing to pay. The lighthouse was built in 1847 on a granite outcropping that local fishermen had long avoided, claiming that the waters around the island were cursed and that strange lights and sounds emanated from its shores during the darkest hours of storm-lashed nights. But the increasing maritime traffic along the coast demanded a navigational aid in these dangerous waters, and the authorities dismissed the fishermen's superstitions as the fears of ignorant men who had spent too many years isolated from civilized society. The first lighthouse keeper, a man named Jonas Blackwood, maintained the station for 37 years with a dedication that became legendary among the maritime community. Ships that passed Sorrow's End during his tenure reported that the light never failed, not once during the worst storms or longest nights, burning with a steady brilliance that seemed to defy the limitations of the oil-burning lens apparatus that powered it. But in 1884, Blackwood was found dead in his quarters under circumstances that the official report described as natural causes following extended illness, though rumors persisted among the local population that his death had been accompanied by phenomena that suggested something far more disturbing than simple mortality. The position remained vacant for several months, as the lighthouse service struggled to find someone willing to accept an assignment that had acquired a reputation for being both dangerous and somehow cursed. The isolation was extreme, the work was demanding, and the pay was modest even by the standards of government employment. But in early 1885, a man named Ezra Morse arrived at the lighthouse service offices in Portland, claiming to be an experienced keeper who had worked stations along the California coast and who was seeking a position that would provide the solitude necessary for the scientific research he wished to pursue. Morse was an unusual choice for lighthouse keeper, possessing an education and refinement that seemed inconsistent with the isolated and physically demanding nature of the work. He spoke knowledgeably about astronomy, meteorology, and maritime navigation, while displaying familiarity with technical subjects that suggested formal training in engineering or natural philosophy. Most remarkably, he seemed genuinely eager to accept the Sorrow's End assignment, expressing enthusiasm for the challenges it would present, rather than concern about its reputation for difficulty and supernatural disturbance. The 25 years that followed Morse's appointment to Sorrow's End were marked by a level of reliability and efficiency that exceeded even the legendary performance of his predecessor. Ships that navigated the treacherous waters around the island reported that the light burned with unprecedented brilliance and consistency, visible from distances that should have been impossible given the technical specifications of the lighthouse equipment. More remarkably, the light seemed to adapt to conditions in ways that suggested intelligence and purpose, beyond simple mechanical operation. During fog that reduced visibility to mere yards, the beam somehow penetrated the murk with intensity that allowed mariners to navigate safely to port. In storms that should have made maintaining the light impossible, the beacon continued to shine with steady reliability that defied every expectation about the limitations of 19th century lighting technology. Most unusually, ships that found themselves in immediate danger of foundering on the rocks reported that the light would pulse and change intensity in patterns that seemed designed to guide them away from hazards and toward safe passages through the reef. But the remarkable performance of the lighthouse under Morse's care was accompanied by reports that suggested the keeper had developed methods of maintaining his station that went far beyond conventional lighthouse operation. Fishermen who worked the waters around Sorrow's End reported seeing strange lights on the island during nights when official records indicated the lighthouse beacon was operating normally. Additional illumination that seemed to move through the keeper's quarters and around the base of the tower in patterns that suggested ritual or ceremonial purposes. More disturbing were the accounts provided by sailors whose vessels had been caught in storms near the island, and who claimed to have heard sounds emanating from the lighthouse that could not be explained by wind or mechanical operation. These witnesses described voices, not just Morse's voice but a chorus of speakers, engaged in conversations or chants that seemed to involve languages that no one could identify. The sounds were reported to be most audible during the worst weather, when the lighthouse beam was performing its most remarkable feats of navigation assistance. The investigation that would ultimately reveal the truth about Morse's methods began in 1910, when the supply ship that made monthly visits to Sorrow's End arrived to find the lighthouse operating normally, but the keeper nowhere to be found. The light was burning with its characteristic brilliance. The station's equipment was functioning perfectly, and all maintenance records were up to date, but Ezra Morse had vanished as completely as if he had never existed. The search for the missing keeper revealed evidence that challenged every assumption about how the lighthouse had been operated during his tenure. Morse's quarters contained equipment and instruments that bore no resemblance to standard lighthouse maintenance gear, while his personal effects included books written in languages that scholars from Harvard University could not identify and artifacts that appeared to predate any known civilization, yet showed no signs of age or deterioration. Most unsettling was the discovery of detailed journals that documented 25 years of experiments in what Morse termed maritime communion, a practice that he claimed enabled him to establish communication with entities that dwelt beneath the ocean and to negotiate agreements that ensured their cooperation in protecting ships that navigated their domain. According to these records, the remarkable performance of the Sorrow's End light was not the result of superior maintenance or advanced technology, but rather the consequence of a supernatural contract that required regular payments in forms that conventional understanding could never accept. The journals revealed that Morse had been conducting elaborate rituals on the island, ceremonies designed to maintain relationships with what he described as the Deep Ones, ancient beings whose existence predated human civilization and whose power over wind, wave, and weather could be harnessed by those who possessed the knowledge and courage necessary to establish contact. These entities, according to Morse's detailed documentation, were willing to assist with maritime safety and navigation in exchange for offerings that satisfied their alien appetites and spiritual requirements. As we explore this chilling tale of supernatural sacrifice disguised as maritime duty, we must confront the possibility that some guardians of safety achieve their purposes through means that challenge our understanding of natural law and moral responsibility. The story we're uncovering forces us to question whether the protection we receive from those who serve in isolated and dangerous positions might sometimes come at prices that we would find unacceptable if we understood their true nature. If you find yourself drawn to these investigations into the dark secrets of those who keep us safe, please share your thoughts in the comments below and join our community by subscribing to the channel. The specific nature of the offerings that Morse provided to his supernatural patrons was detailed in coded entries throughout his journals, written in a mixture of English, Latin, and symbols that seemed to represent concepts for which no conventional language possessed adequate terminology. The offerings began simply enough: food, wine, and tobacco cast into the waters around the island during specific astronomical events that were believed to enhance their spiritual value for the entities that received them. But as Morse's relationship with the Deep Ones developed and their assistance with lighthouse operations became more elaborate and reliable, the demands they made escalated to levels that required increasingly extreme measures to satisfy. The entities apparently possessed appetites that could not be satisfied with simple material offerings, requiring instead payments that involved the life force and consciousness of living beings. Morse's journals describe a progression from the sacrifice of fish and seabirds to offerings that involved larger and more intelligent creatures, each death carefully conducted according to procedures that were claimed to maximize the spiritual energy extracted from the dying and ensure its proper transmission to the underwater realm that was home to his supernatural partners. The keeper had apparently convinced himself that these sacrifices were justified by the lives they saved, that the deaths of animals were a reasonable price to pay for the supernatural assistance that prevented maritime disasters. But the most disturbing entries in Morse's journals describe experiments in what he termed consciousness transfer, procedures designed to channel the awareness and memories of dying creatures directly to the Deep Ones as a form of entertainment or spiritual nourishment that was particularly valued by these ancient entities. The keeper had developed techniques for prolonging the dying process while maintaining the victim's consciousness, creating experiences of extended suffering that were believed to enhance the offering's value to his supernatural patrons. The evidence of these activities was found throughout the island, hidden in locations that had been carefully prepared to conceal the true nature of Morse's work from any casual observer. Caves beneath the lighthouse contained altars and ritual implements that had been used for the systematic sacrifice of creatures whose remains showed evidence of procedures that combined religious ceremony with systematic torture designed to maximize the extraction of life force. Most horrifying was the discovery of human remains that suggested Morse's offerings had eventually progressed beyond animals to include people whose disappearance could be attributed to maritime accidents or natural causes. The bones found in the deepest chambers beneath the lighthouse showed evidence of the same ritualistic treatment that had been applied to animal sacrifices, while personal effects recovered from these locations indicated that the victims had included sailors, fishermen, and other individuals whose connection to the sea made them particularly suitable for Morse's purposes. The keeper's journals provide detailed rationales for these escalating sacrifices, revealing a man who had gradually convinced himself that the lives of individual humans were insignificant compared to the collective benefit provided by his supernatural arrangement. He wrote extensively about the mathematics of salvation, calculating that each person sacrificed to maintain his relationship with the Deep Ones prevented dozens of maritime deaths that would otherwise occur when ships foundered on the rocks around Sorrow's End. The entities require increasingly sophisticated offerings as their assistance becomes more comprehensive. Morse wrote in one particularly chilling entry, "A simple fisherman provides sufficient spiritual nourishment to ensure safe passage for a small vessel, while the sacrifice of a ship's captain or experienced navigator yields enough supernatural energy to protect an entire fleet during the most dangerous storm conditions." The journal entries also revealed that Morse had developed techniques for luring potential victims to the island, using the lighthouse's supernatural capabilities to create false signals that would cause ships to seek shelter in the dangerous waters around Sorrow's End. Vessels that responded to these deceptive beacons would find themselves trapped among the reefs, their crews forced to abandon ship and seek refuge on the island, where they would fall under Morse's power and ultimately serve as offerings to his underwater masters. The investigation into these activities was conducted by Agent William Harrison of the Bureau of Investigation, whose expertise in cases involving maritime crime and unusual circumstances made him particularly suited to unraveling the mystery of the missing lighthouse keeper. Harrison's analysis of the evidence found on Sorrow's End revealed a systematic program of murder and supernatural commerce that had operated for more than 2 decades without detection by federal authorities. The subject appears to have been conducting human sacrifice on an industrial scale, Harrison wrote in his classified report. The evidence suggests that dozens of individuals have been murdered according to ritualistic procedures that were designed to serve supernatural purposes rather than conventional criminal motivations. The isolation of the lighthouse station and the subject's official status as a government employee provided perfect cover for activities that challenge every assumption about the nature of public service and institutional oversight. The agent's investigation also revealed that Morse's supernatural arrangement had been more successful than even his own journals suggested. Maritime records showed that the waters around Sorrow's End had experienced the lowest rate of shipping accidents in the North Atlantic during his tenure, despite being among the most dangerous navigation hazards along the entire coast. The statistical evidence suggested that his relationship with the Deep Ones had indeed provided protection for passing vessels, though the human cost of this supernatural insurance had been carefully hidden from those who benefited from it. The search for Morse himself proved fruitless, though the circumstances of his disappearance suggested that he had not simply fled to avoid prosecution, but had instead become a victim of the same forces he had served for so many years. The evidence found in his quarters indicated that the Deep Ones had been making increasingly extreme demands for offerings, requiring sacrifices that even Morse's corrupted moral reasoning could not justify or provide. His final journal entries describe growing desperation as his supernatural patrons demanded payments that exceeded his ability to supply, while threatening to withdraw their protection and unleash their wrath upon the shipping lanes he had spent decades safeguarding. The last entry, written just days before the supply ship discovered his absence, reveals a man who had realized that he had become expendable to the entities he had served so faithfully. "The deep ones grow impatient with my limitations," Morse wrote in his distinctive handwriting. "They speak of finding a more suitable servant, one whose conscience will not interfere with the efficient provision of the offerings they require. I fear that my usefulness to them has reached its end, and that I may soon join the ranks of those who have fed their appetites. If this record survives, let it serve as warning to any who might seek to follow the path I have chosen. The protection of the depths comes with prices that inevitably exceed any mortal's ability to pay." The discovery of Morse's body came 3 months after his disappearance, when his remains washed ashore on a beach nearly 100 miles from Sorrow's End. The condition of the corpse suggested that he had been subjected to the same ritualistic procedures that he had applied to his own victims, while the location where he was found indicated that his body had been transported by currents that should not have carried objects from the lighthouse's vicinity to that particular stretch of coastline. Dr. Margaret Sinclair, the physician who examined Morse's remains, documented evidence that challenged her understanding of both human anatomy and the physical laws that governed decomposition and preservation. The subject appears to have been dead for approximately 3 months, yet the tissues show preservation characteristics that suggest immersion in substances or exposure to conditions that are not found in normal marine environments, she wrote in her report. Additionally, the body bears evidence of procedures that were performed with knowledge of anatomy and surgical technique that exceed what would be expected from ritualistic mutilation. The examination revealed that Morse had been subjected to the same consciousness extraction procedures that his journals described applying to other victims, suggesting that his death had served as a final offering to the entities he had served. But unlike his other victims, whose deaths had apparently satisfied the Deep One's requirements, Morse's sacrifice seemed to have been conducted as punishment rather than routine sustenance, carried out with a cruelty that exceeded even the keeper's own elaborate methods. The Lighthouse Service's response to the investigation was to assign a new keeper to Sorrow's End while attempting to suppress public knowledge of the circumstances surrounding Morse's disappearance. But the replacement keeper, a veteran of other difficult assignments, lasted only 6 weeks before requesting immediate transfer due to what he described as supernatural disturbances that make normal lighthouse operation impossible. According to the replacement keeper's report, the lighthouse equipment continued to function with the same supernatural efficiency that had characterized Morse's tenure, operating without human intervention and displaying capabilities that exceeded its technical specifications. More disturbing were the sounds and phenomena that suggested the presence of invisible entities throughout the station, voices speaking in unknown languages, the movement of objects by unseen hands, and atmospheric conditions that created feelings of being watched and evaluated by intelligences that possessed neither human form nor human sympathy. Subsequent keepers assigned to Sorrow's End reported similar experiences, leading to a rapid turnover that made it difficult to maintain normal lighthouse operations. The station acquired a reputation within the service as a career killer that ambitious keepers avoided, while desperate or naive applicants found themselves overwhelmed by duties that seemed to require supernatural assistance to perform adequately. The solution adopted by the Lighthouse Service was to automate the station's operations using the most advanced technology available in 1911, installing equipment that could maintain the beacon without requiring permanent human presence on the island. But even these automated systems displayed the same supernatural characteristics that had marked Morse's manual operation, performing functions that their designers insisted were impossible while providing navigation assistance that seemed to respond intelligently to changing conditions. Federal monitoring of Sorrow's End continued for several decades as investigators attempted to understand the mechanisms underlying the lighthouse's supernatural performance and assess the potential risks posed by continued operation of equipment that seemed to be controlled by entities whose motivations remained unknown. The station's logs showed patterns of activity that suggested ongoing communication between the automated systems and underwater sources that conventional science could not identify or explain. As our investigation reveals the horrifying price paid to maintain this beacon of safety, we must ask ourselves what other guardians of public welfare might be operating under similar supernatural arrangements, and whether the protection we assume in our daily lives might come at costs that we would find unacceptable if we understood their true nature. If these revelations about the dark bargains that keep us safe compel you to reflect on the hidden sacrifices that maintain our security, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more explorations into the terrible prices of protection. The modern era brought new challenges for monitoring Sorrow's End, as environmental regulations and scientific curiosity increased scrutiny of government installations that displayed unusual characteristics. Marine biologists studying the waters around the lighthouse reported discoveries that challenged conventional understanding of ocean ecosystems, including species that appeared to possess intelligence and organizational capabilities that suggested evolution along paths that terrestrial life had never followed. Dr. Robert Chen, a marine biologist who conducted extensive research in the waters around Sorrow's End during the 1970s, documented encounters with creatures that seemed to embody the deep ones described in Morse's journals. The entities we observed displayed characteristics that suggest intelligence comparable to or exceeding human capability, combined with adaptations to deep ocean environments that should not be compatible with such complex neurological development, he wrote in his classified research report. The professor's research team also detected acoustic phenomena that suggested ongoing communication between surface installations and underwater sources located at depths that made conventional investigation impossible. The signals followed patterns that implied linguistic structure and purpose, though attempts to decode their meaning proved unsuccessful despite the application of advanced computational analysis techniques. The lighthouse itself continued to operate with supernatural efficiency well into the modern era, its automated systems displaying capabilities that advanced far beyond their original specifications as decades passed. Engineering consultants who examined the equipment reported finding modifications and enhancements that had been implemented by unknown means, using technologies that did not correspond to any known manufacturing or installation processes. Most disturbing was the discovery that the lighthouse's supernatural performance was continuing to exact human costs, though these were now concealed within statistical patterns rather than direct sacrifice. Maritime accidents in other coastal areas showed increases that correlated precisely with the protection provided around Sorrow's End, suggesting that the Deep One's assistance had not eliminated danger, but simply redirected it to locations where it would attract less attention. The psychological impact of working at or near Sorrow's End continued to affect personnel assigned to monitor the station, with many reporting dreams and visions that seemed to provide insights into the underwater realm that was home to Morse's former partners. These experiences often included detailed knowledge about maritime history, navigation techniques, and ocean conditions that the subjects had never studied, suggesting that the Deep Ones continued to use human consciousness as a medium for communication and influence. The academic study of the case was complicated by classification of evidence and the reluctance of government agencies to acknowledge the existence of supernatural phenomena that might require responses beyond conventional law enforcement or military capabilities. But the documentation that survived official suppression efforts provided insights into the psychology of individuals who were willing to commit atrocities in service of what they perceived to be greater goods. Morse's transformation from presumably normal lighthouse keeper to systematic murderer illustrated how isolation and authority could corrupt moral reasoning when combined with exposure to forces that offered power in exchange for increasingly extreme compromises. His journals revealed a progression of rationalization that enabled him to justify acts that grew more heinous with each repetition, while his supernatural success reinforced beliefs that his actions were not only acceptable, but morally required. The case also demonstrated how institutions could unknowingly become complicit in systematic evil when they failed to provide adequate oversight of individuals operating in isolated circumstances. The Lighthouse Service's satisfaction with Morse's performance had prevented them from investigating the methods he employed, while the positive results he achieved had discouraged questions about their underlying causes. The international implications of the Sorrow's End case became apparent when similar incidents were reported at lighthouse stations and maritime facilities around the world, suggesting that Morse's arrangement with the Deep Ones was part of a broader pattern of supernatural commerce that operated globally. Intelligence agencies began sharing information about unexplained maritime phenomena and unusual lighthouse performance, leading to the development of classified monitoring programs designed to detect and assess supernatural maritime activity. The environmental impact of the supernatural arrangements at Sorrow's End became apparent through oceanographic research that revealed artificial modifications to natural currents and weather patterns in the vicinity of the lighthouse. The Deep One's manipulation of marine conditions to assist navigation had created long-term changes to the ecosystem that affected species distribution and breeding patterns throughout the region. The ethical questions raised by Morse's case continued to influence maritime policy and lighthouse operations well into the modern era. The recognition that some forms of supernatural assistance might require human sacrifice created moral dilemmas that maritime authorities were reluctant to address directly, but which influenced decisions about station automation and personnel assignment. The physical structure of Sorrow's End Light Station remains in operation today, its beacon continuing to guide mariners through dangerous waters with efficiency that exceeds the capabilities of its visible equipment. The Coast Guard maintains the facility through remote monitoring systems that minimize human exposure to whatever forces continue to influence its operation, while ongoing research attempts to understand mechanisms that conventional engineering cannot explain. The macabre secret of the lighthouse keeper serves as a reminder that the protection we assume in our daily lives may sometimes come at prices that we would find unacceptable if we understood their true nature. Ezra Morse's willingness to commit murder in service of maritime safety illustrates how easily moral boundaries can be transgressed when authority is combined with isolation and supernatural temptation. His legacy lives on not in the lives he saved through his supernatural arrangement, but in the recognition that evil can disguise itself as duty, and that the greatest threats to human dignity often come from those who claim to serve the public good. The light that continues to shine from Sorrow's End may guide ships to safety, but it also serves as a beacon warning that some forms of protection require prices that no civilized society should ever be willing to pay. In the end, perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Morse's story is not the murders he committed, but the efficiency with which his supernatural arrangement operated, providing genuine benefits that made it easy to overlook the atrocities that sustained it. The Deep Ones kept their part of the bargain faithfully, protecting ships and saving lives with supernatural reliability that exceeded anything human technology could provide. But the cost of their assistance, measured in human lives and moral corruption, reveals that some bargains are too terrible to honor, regardless of the benefits they might provide. The waters around Sorrow's End continue to hide their secrets beneath waves that have witnessed centuries of sacrifice and supernatural commerce, while the lighthouse that Morse served so faithfully continues to burn with light that may illuminate more than the physical dangers that threaten maritime travelers. Whether the beacon that guides ships to safety also serves as a signal to forces that dwell in oceanic depths, where human law and morality hold no sway, remains a question that those responsible for our safety may prefer never to answer.